this bottle to look at a bright sunny day. I'll climb out this bottle to look at your bright happy face. I'm gonna perfection. You offer no answers. What happened? The questions. What you can take together. Take them. Still not tonight.
I had have a segment, I haven't updated it in a while, called The Long 100, where I write about 100 albums that I feel lucky to have heard. I mean, it's kind of like Decibel's Hall of Fame.
Okay.
Except when you're doing like best ofs, it's always going to be like, you know, Master of Puppets or Paranoid or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You're always going to end up with those albums.
Yeah, exactly.
But for me, it was like bands or albums that I feel like I was lucky to have heard it when I did.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and El Diablo was one of those albums for me. Like I said, it was just it was on a mixtape or a compilation tape that somebody made for me.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I don't even think I knew what post-rock was. Like, I was vaguely familiar with bands like Mogwai or Godspeed You Black Emperor, but I didn't have like language or terminology for what was going on in that scene. I don't think I even knew what shoegaze was.
Mm-hmm.
And so all I could compare Will Haven to was other bands that were kind of coming out of the hardcore scene and doing something atmospheric.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned Bloodlit. I definitely was aware of Bloodlit and saw them live and had, what was the second album? The first album. The first album was called Surf and Falls.
The first one was, they had the Work Ethic EP. Oh, I'm thinking Dead Guy. Sorry, thinking Dead Guy. Bloodlet. Fixation. No, that's that guy. What was it? Now I'm stuck on Dead Guy. Because I did an interview with someone about Dead Guy the other day. No, Surf and Falls was the third one. So
whatever the second one was, I heard that and you mentioned Dead Guy, but I heard Kiss It Goodbye around the same time.
Yeah.
And I think that Kiss It Goodbye album has a lot in common with what you guys were doing on El Diablo. But like I said, at the time there was no such thing as post metal or doomgaze or all these terms that came out like 5-10 years later. At the time, like, who did you see as your peers? Were you aware of, obviously you knew Neurosis and you knew Bloodlit, but were you aware that there was like this growing movement of like slow, heavy atmospheric bands?
Not really. When we were first writing and recording and then playing El Diablo, we were doing the whole Earth Crisis, Snapcase, Strife stuff. We were playing with those bands a lot. So we weren't, I guess you could say it underground, but as far as really underground, we were playing with the more mainstream, I guess. I hate to say mainstream, but the more popular of the hardcore bands. And that was kind of what we were doing.
Yeah.
And then we jumped ship right to Deftones. In 97, when we came out with El Diablo, we were already touring with Deftones on El Diablo record. So we jumped fast, from the hardcore scene into the mainstream, rock, new metal scene And then we stuck in that scene for quite a while. After Deftones, we were doing tours of Soulfly, Slipknot, Fear Factory. That was kind of our thing, our peers at the time. And we kind of left the hardcore scene in the dust a little bit. Not that we didn't want to be a hardcore band, but we were just going out with these bigger bands. And, so yeah, all the underground stuff kind of just went underneath us a little bit because we were so tied up in the whole Deftones, like that world, that we missed a lot of the bands that were coming up. Like I think Botch and like Bane, all that stuff. We had kind of already been out of that scene a little bit when we started like realizing, oh, there's other like extreme. I mean, Dead Guy was the only thing that I thought was like taking something different, even Bloodlet a little bit, than what we were kind of used to in the hardcore scene. Like I thought those two bands were like, oh, they're going out doing something on their own, especially Dead Guy. So I felt I had a lot of kinship with Dead Guy and Kiss It Goodbye. But then, yeah, like I said, we kind of jumped ship there and we missed a lot of like the stuff that was kind of coming up around the same time that were more underground, that I wish we would have been more. Although before we did Deftones, we actually did go back East Coast and we did play with Coalesce, Converge, and Today Is the Day, bands like that. And I thought those were kind of the more of our style of bands for sure.
Yeah.
And we played with Dillinger. We played with Dillinger too, which I thought was kind of in our vein. So I would say mostly Converge, Coalesce, Dillinger, Today Is the Day. Those were our type bands that we were like, I thought we'd fit in with more than the Earth Crisis, Snapcase stuff.
Yeah. I mean, my take on it, and this is the first time we're talking, and so I only really knew Will Haven through, a few interviews in like Metal Maniacs or whatever, and, listening to your albums back in the day. But my take on it was like, hardcore kids had no idea what to do with you.
Mm-hmm.
Like if there was like a doom metal, stoner metal scene, they weren't that into what you guys were doing either. And there's also a lot of like elitism and snobism because of your connection with things like, Deftones and Soulfly and stuff like that.
Correct. Yeah.
And it wasn't until, years later when, there was that whole ISIS Hydra Head thing going on that there was like an audience specifically for those type of bands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so you guys were ahead of your time by, 5 years, maybe 10 years. And what I've come to realize is that it never pays to be ahead of your time.
Oh, totally. 100%.
It's always more beneficial to be of your time.
Yeah, exactly.
And, especially in the music scene where like, promoters don't know what to do with you, record labels don't know what to do with you, like who are we going to pair these guys up with? And you were lucky that you were, that at least like, Deftones and Max Cavalera or whoever were hip to what you guys were doing and, could see that you guys were doing something special and different.
Yeah. And it's funny because to me, Will Haven is a metal band, and we're not like too extreme, but I do see where it is maybe hard for people to palate a little bit. But yeah, it's a weird world, like how we sound so different, but we were able to tour with so many different bands. I mean, we toured with even VOD, Today Is the Day, and like Slipknot, and like it kind of blows my mind that we were able to do what we did. But yeah, we never blew up. We have not played anything over maybe 500 people ever. I mean, on our own. Of course, we played big shows before, but it wasn't our crowd. So yeah, it's weird. I always have this thing. It's like I don't know how Will Haven, not to say we're the best band in the world, but I've always wondered how Will Haven never kind of broke through more than we did. I don't know what held us back. Maybe it's the music. Maybe it's Grady is a little too abrasive for people. I don't know, but we know we do what we do. We love what we do, and we have fun with it. And it wouldn't change the world what we created, but it's always kind of been the one question in my mind, like, because I see a lot of bands that I don't think are as ahead of their time as we are that are blowing up, or bands that I don't think are as creative as we are that are blowing up. And I'm like, it kind of puzzles me sometimes, but I mean, people like what they like, and I get it. But yeah, it's a question I've just wondered how even to get to just the next level, like to where we could play like places that Dillinger was, because Dillinger got huge there for a little while, and they're way more abrasive than we are, to go see a Dillinger show that like you come out with a brain aneurysm, but for us, we're not that extreme, but yeah, I kind of never got why we never got the push that some of the other bands did. I guess that's a question that always be remained.
I mean, was it on the label marketing side? Like, what do you think how do you think you would have reached a wider audience? Doing what you guys were doing.
Yeah, I think when I look back on it, I think the biggest problem is that we did these big tours with Deftones and Soulfly and Slipknot, but we never backed them up with anything. I think growing up with the Deftones guys, I saw when they first got signed to Maverick, their first few tours were Pantera, White Zombie, Bad Brains. They were doing these big tours, and then they would follow up with a headlining tour after that, small places, but they would go back right after they went on these big tours. And so over the years, they got this cult, this following to where they are now. Well, Haven never did that. We did a Deftones tour, and then we come home and sit on our ass for a couple of years, and then expect to go back out and try to get new fans again. So I think the being in a band, if you want to succeed, you got to work your ass off. Like we toured with bands like Slipknot. I saw how those guys work. We toured with them on their first record, and to this day, I see how hard those guys work. They deserve where they are because they worked that hard. We didn't put the time in to get to where we deserve to be that big. So, and now over the last, I would say 10 years, we've only played to our crowd. We've never opened up for a big band in the last 10 years. Maybe like one show here or there, but we've never been on tour with big bands like we were back in the 90s and early 2000s. So when you play to your own crowd, you're only going to keep your own crowd. You're not going to gain a new fan base unless the word of mouth spreads that you're an awesome band. But to pick up a new audience, you got to stay in people's face. You got to keep playing and being out there. And so I think now if we toured with Deftones, because when we toured with Deftones, we were playing 500 seat clubs. We were playing bars, Now they're playing, arenas and huge theaters. So it's a different world. And I think if we were able to open up for Deftones or even a Slipknot now, I think we would capture a bigger audience. And I think we would see a growth in the band. But, we haven't had that opportunity. So we're kind of waiting in our own little, Willhaven world, which is fine. It's cool. I'm not complaining at all. We have a great fan base. We could play 500 seaters and sell them out. But to get to the next level, we just needed to work harder, which we weren't. I don't guess we weren't in that mind frame to do it, which is fair. So it wasn't marketing, wasn't anything like that. It was just we needed to put in more work if we wanted to be more successful.
Some life could get some life. flashing every step, wrong by wrong. Oh no, come back, down to the gutter clouds. I'm sad, I'm down, I'm right up on. The smell, my friend, I'm so not yours. The partners, right back, with some weird. Nothing, waiting. You left me, ringing.
As this post-metal thing developed, were you seeing some of that audience find Willhaven and get hip to what you guys were doing?
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like I'm really lost to where our fan base came from or where they're coming from, because we've played so many different shows and different bands and stuff. I do think our main crowd is in the Deftones world. It seems to me like the messages I get and the people that comment or whatever, and a lot of people that follow us have like some Deftones reference in their name or something like that. So it's probably them spreading the word or whatever. But I think that tour in '97 that we did was such an impactful time in people's lives because, Deftones just came out around the Fur, and that record broke really big for them. And people were really excited about Deftones at the time. So they were really excited to see them live because Deftones had toured on big tours. And this was like their first headlining their own tour. So people were excited to see them, and they took us with them. And there was only the two of us on most of these shows. So it was just us and Deftones. They walked out of there remembering who Willhaven was because we played right before him, and that was it. That was the show. And so that made a huge impact on people seeing Deftones for the first time, but also seeing this brand new band they never heard of go out and just fucking destroy everybody, because we were just as hungry as they were at the time. And we were more aggressive, heavier, so people walked out there going, holy shit, I just saw the crazy show. I saw this crazy opening heavy ass band, but then I just got to see the Deftones, which I love. So it was just that made a whole, and we did the US with them and Europe. So that tour is where I think we gained a lot of our audience from. And to this day, I think people still have that memory in their head of seeing that show and hearing the band and just they were nostalgic, so they always had a love for Willhaven because of such a huge impact in our life. And then we get fans that have seen us with Soulfly and Slipknot, but to me, it seems like our crowd definitely comes from that Deftones tree.
Yeah. I mean, it just dawned on me that audience was so young that, they didn't have the normal scene biases that come from, like somebody like me who grew up in the metal scene or, the hardcore scene, whereas like you're judged for how your hair is, you're judged by, the shoes you wear and stuff like that. And so in a way, like they were the perfect audience for Willhaven because, they didn't come in with any expectations of like, oh, you guys need to sound like this in order to fit in with our scene. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, exactly. I think you're 100% right. I think a lot of those kids that went to a Deftones show back then, they hadn't heard of Crisis. They didn't know any hardcore bands at all. They just knew Deftones or Korn or Limp Bizkit, So when they see a band like Willhaven show up, they're like, well, I've never heard this shit in my life. I don't know what hardcore is. I don't know what Neurosis is. Like, holy shit. Like, they don't sound like, they're not rap rock, like, what is it? So they probably thought, oh, this is cool. I found a new band that no one knows about that's hella heavy, that kind of maybe resembles Deftones in a little bit, the way they dress, the way they act, but they're not Deftones. So I think people were just like excited to see something new and refreshing to them. Or, we've been around for a while and in the hardcore scene. So I think you're right. Like people didn't expect that at all. They just thought maybe another rap rock band or like whatever. And then we come out and like, holy shit, what is this? I never heard this music before. So yeah, it was very impactful. And I think you're 100% right. We were just at the right time for sure.
And all these years later from, having trouble finding a place with like the hardcore scene or the metal scene, do you feel vindicated now that there's like this big like subgenre of bands that are basically doing what you guys were doing on the first album?
It's funny because I hear people say that, but I don't listen to a lot of music these days for some reason.
Okay.
I think it's just because I'm just so like I'm just over it, like I haven't heard a record that I liked in a long time, unfortunately. That just really blew me away. So I'm kind of out of the scene, but I hear it a lot. Like, oh my God, you guys are like, every band sounds like you guys now. And or they, inspire this band, whatever. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's awesome. I'm flattered, but I wouldn't know what band to listen to. I wouldn't know. I can't. If somebody said, well, what band do you think sounds like Live? And I couldn't even give you an answer. I have no idea. So I'm stoked that there's a scene out there like that now. I mean, that's awesome. If people are inspired by us or whatever, or trying to copy us, I'm totally flattered. I think it's fucking awesome because I didn't expect even to like play out of Sacramento, let alone like maybe put an impact in the world. So yeah, but it's funny because a lot of people will still reference, like if you hear a band that sounds like certain thing, people will say, well, that sounds like Willhaven, which is cool because, like it seems like we still get our dues, like we're not kind of lost in the shuffle. Like, oh, you guys sound like that band a long time ago. Like, oh, you guys sound like Willhaven. They're still around, so that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're not, people are just ripping us off and no one knows who we are, which happens a lot, but
yeah.
So it's cool to be a pioneer or something. But yeah, I wish I knew bands that sound like us. I'd love to check them out for sure.
I mean, basically everything that came out on Hydra Head Records from like
Oh.
2000 onwards.
I'll have to go back to the discography and check it out.
I mean, the big one would have been ISIS. I think when I first heard ISIS, and they were doing a different thing. They were really doing more of like a sludge metal thing when they first came out.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time they put out their first album, which came out, I think, 5 years after El Diablo, maybe? It came out a little bit later. But, by the time they put out that first album, there was a lot of similarities between what they were doing in terms of like integrating the post-rock and the shoegaze stuff and what you guys had already done on El Diablo. And whether or not they knew who Willhaven were, I have no idea.
Yeah.
It seemed like there was this kind of like Massachusetts art rock scene that was going on. And so those guys were clued into like Godspeed You Black Emperor and stuff like that, already. And so it made sense for them to mix that with, super heavy slow music. But the similarities were there, definitely.
Yeah, and I liked ISIS. Yeah, I mean, I heard people kind of mention that before, but I don't think people give Neurosis a big enough credit. I think they have and had a huge influence on a lot of bands, even us. And I think so. If you say a band sounds like Willhaven, well, you got to go back to see what influenced Willhaven, and it was Neurosis at the start, and still is this day. So, Neurosis is one of those bands I think that deserves way more credit than they get. They were an underground band that they were a musicians, like kind of like Willhaven. They were like your band's favorite band.
Yeah.
Like Jay Weinberg from Slipknot, the drummer, like his favorite band in the world is Neurosis, and people wouldn't know that, but that's his favorite band in the world. So they've influenced so many people that people just don't even know, they don't get it. So yeah, I heard a lot of Neurosis and ISIS too. And I say, okay, I get it, what they're doing, but they're trying to do something different as well. So yeah, I think El Diablo was just one of those things where we just took our Neurosis influence and try to create something new with it and not sound like Neurosis, but had that vibe, But maybe maybe the first ones to really like kind of take it and run with it. Maybe people just didn't know what to do with kind of Neurosis music back then. But we took that influence. We just try to make our own genre out of it, create something new and not rip those guys off at all, which I think we did.
I've seen my fate.